Sampling contexts son diálogos interactivos que promueven una reflexión en torno a qué es y cómo se hace hoy arquitectura. Sampling contexts va más allá del formato conferencia para desvelar procesos de trabajo, de gestión y de comunicación desde lógicas contemporáneas como catalogación, remix o ensamblaje. Sampling contexts son estudios emergentes europeos que van a revelar cómo producen y reproducen sus arquitecturas. Un escenario valioso que no es accesible a pesar de vivir en un mundo de sobresaturación de imágenes. Sampling Contexts es el prototipo de Argument, un ciclo anual de investigación y publicación del Departamento de Proyectos Arquitectónicos con el que construir una posición en torno a un tema de interés disciplinar. Bienvenidos a este momento irrepetible. Welcome to Sampling Contexts.
Well, welcome everyone to this last session of the argument cycle, which this year has been called Sampling Context, as you all know. Today we have the pleasure to count on Alexandre Thiraud. He co-founded the Paris-based architectural practice called Bruther together with his partner Stéphanie Peru in 2008, and since then their work has achieved an unusual maturity in a quite short time of period. The relation between users, time and materiality is crucial in their work to build the design strategy. So thank you very much, Alexandre, for being here and accepting our invitation and sharing your thoughts with us. I want to take also this opportunity to thank all the curatorial team for all their effort during this year, also for the success they have achieved in the organization of the whole program. I think this is something that has to be acknowledged, so thank you very much and congrats for all the work done. There's still a little bit of work to do with the book, but we'll make it over. So I think that's all. I leave you with the team so they can lead the event, and thank you very much for being here all.
Thank you, Silvia. Well, thank you again, all of you, for coming today. And just for the people that don't know anything about the event, we will talk a little bit about what is Sampling Contest about. I mean, Sampling Contest has tried to reveal work processes of production, management, and communication from contemporary work of classification, tagging, remix, assemblies, and post-production. With the format of a dialogue, some of the events were held between two offices, as the last event, for example, between Guillermo Santoma and Luis Urculo. And while others, for example, like today, we have just one international office invited for us. That it's the case of Bruther with Alexandre Thiraud and Stéphanie Peru.
Well, before we start, we want to thank you again, the project department, for the support and the initiative. Also to welcome the colleagues that will take on argument for next year, and thank you everyone for coming and for coming to all these events. And also thank you, Juanito, I don't know where are you, but thank you very much for the DJ sessions that you have been holding during these events. Well, today, for the closure of the cycle, we have Alexandre Thiraud. Alexandre, if you want to come to the stage. Silvia already presented him. As you know from other events, for the first part, he will present us some of his work, which we believe support the idea of sampling context. And after that, we will go into the dialogue part of the session in which Eva and we will be talking and discussing with him different topics. So thank you, Alexandre, very much for being here today, and you can start. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. What's it? Okay, it doesn't work. Yeah, it works. Okay, thank you very much for your invitation. Also about this introduction. So I will try tonight just to explain a bit more about our practice. I mean, the practice that we started to build with Stephanie, and I mean for 10 years. So it's always quite difficult to put some words on our daily work, but one more time I will try to give you maybe some keys, just to try to know more about, I don't know if it's a specific approach, but maybe this is just our own approach. So this is the way that we started 10 years ago, more or less. I mean, we started to work with Stephanie in another office before, but it's a very faraway story. So just to respect more or less the rules for this lecture, I just selected 3 projects that I will maybe not describe because it's not so interesting to describe, but just to explain some parts, what is so important in our daily life, and then just to open the discussion at the end of this short presentation. So it will be something like 30 minutes, more or less. I will try to respect the schedule, and yeah. So maybe just to introduce and just to maybe explain a little bit more about our practice. So I think something which is quite important for us with Stephanie, that probably we don't know so much. I mean, we know, we only know how to think by making things. And it would have been probably impossible to have this discussion or this presentation tonight without doing our work day by day. So daily work never created, in our case, any thesis, any corpus for us. To say it clearly, to make is our way of thinking. A way of thinking it is also a way of communicating. So since the beginning of our office, our process is strongly linked with an archiving work, but not specific subject, no corpus have ever been predefined. Things just appeared as the work was moving forward. It is the only engine. So for 10 years, things succeeded on another one, text, image, project, construction. 3 years ago, so we published the book Introduction by our own, and it expresses an attempt to settle a day-by-day established thought. So the book can be considered as an iconographic catalog mixing references, pictures, drawings, plans. So stepping back, it seems to me that this particular way of writing down information randomly is one of the most important things to preserve. When we are asked why, I do not have any other answer than saying this is the most honest way to do it. Honest because it has been settled this way. In the end, we could not work on another way. So the construction, step by step, is one of the single ensemble which tries to be totally free. So in our work, if there is a plan, it is visible only when the journey has been made. The whole singularity of our practice is created by a linear jumble, because this is definitely a jumble. Questions never appear right away. They settle and mix during the work process. So we are therefore trying to build a coherent work where projects hold on to each other, looking for a common base. And this common base is to build usual objects, useful, poetic for a day-to-day use. So we found this image while working on the Berlin New Museum competition on the Cultural Forum site in Berlin. So this photo montage made by Francesco Venezia places next to each other two iconic buildings. So the real subject that stimulates us here is not really a time nor a style question. It is more about the connection between architecture and program, between support and supply. So in this lecture, we could describe some walls dispositions, a particular structure, as a rigid form, a frozen form. In fact, what we are interested in is how architecture is thought about, made, how it becomes architecture, how it overtakes its spatial condition and its rigidity in time, how it adapts itself in order to avoid obsolescence. This picture, which is a landmark in our practice, does not talk about function nor program. Before anything, it defines some uses potential, a possible future. This picture illustrates a central question in our work, the question of malleability, how a building is able to absorb the evolution of uses. Beyond any precise or program, the challenge for us is to set structural and constructive devices able to ensure uses reversibility through time. In other words, we aim to give our buildings means to evolve. This possibility of evolution therefore offers a certain kind of freedom to its users. It is all about offering spatial and constructive forms able to adapt our nervous and unpredictable contemporaneity. Those pictures don't document our buildings as an architectural project, but talk about uses that exist in the building. Without any doubt, architecture is a fixed form, built, but is not finished. It continues itself in its confrontation with movement or experience, the experience we have. For us, projects have to be considered as being part of an infinite chain. It starts way before us and will be pursued later on, with someone probably carrying other ideas or agenda. In this sense, architecture is directly linked to the other, who completes it and finishes it. It is an art which is destinated, which is a suggestion. The built is not definitive, it has to be lived. So every image that you just show were taken in the Cultural and Sports Center that we built in Paris, something like 4 years ago. And this building shows our ambitions to disconnect form and function. Our goal is to make possible conditions of a flexible and evolutive building. So this building at first has to be a uses incubator and a new polarity in the city and for the city. So this building is located in the east part of Paris, so inside of the town hall, in downtown, in a neighborhood which is called Saint-Blaise, which is one of the densest districts of Europe and that hosts the youngest Parisian population. One of these building specificities is linked to its urban situation. A built buffer made out of only social housing units. Those buildings circle a big void just like an arena composed by a typical 80s architecture. The neighborhood is a hemmed zone. The streets go under large porches. We find a juxtaposition of situations, of periods, where the windows are small. In some, the atmosphere is lackluster. So before even thinking about the program, the first stake was linked to to the implementation of the project. So we wanted to preserve and emphasize the main resource of the site, which is the void. So we proposed a compact building that was designed in a vertical way. This precise implementation in the axis of the street frees the building on its 4 faces and offers new views toward the heart of the block. Until then, this space was impossible to fill. So this void could mainly be characterized as a space of possibilities, possibility of adaptation and habitation. So this space is a space in which we can live. So beyond its aesthetic aspect, the interesting point of this project lays in the relationship it has with its context. So the building behaves as if it was both close and far from its environment. So this is really readable in its proximities, in its materials, and in the uses it allows. It has a capacity to fill and to satisfy voids from an urban and a social perspective. So through this image, we can understand that the building is autonomous and it reacts when facing its environment. We could not say that the project is the result of a contextual gesture because the building does not copy the size or typology of its neighborhoods, but it takes eclectically some details from its surroundings. So this picture from the construction's time shows the setting up of large free floors carried by a post and beams structure located on the border of the building. For us, drawing a structure means designing malleability of uses. This malleability is part of the high requirement we impose to our own projects. Our buildings have to be strong and relevant enough to organize themselves until a possible mutation. So we like to say that the only program that matters is the duty of adaptability. In this rational, optimized, and ruled structural device, we also are interested in the deterioration of this logic, just like this tree that needs to be supported by this prosthetic. This is also what is shown in this picture. Here are revealed structural anomalies that exist fundamentally only because of this duty of maladaptability. Here, beams and columns could have had the same dimensions, more or less, but it is not the case. Here, each element has its dimension and it goes like that. It is a decision free from any structural logic. The project gathers within a compact volume a large diversity of functions, uses, atmospheres, materials, relationship with the surrounding. What we can read first is a stratification, both formal and functional. We want our building to be easy to read. Structurally, they work as floors stacked on each other, independent in their organization and their expression. Overlaid elements, autonomous parts. Each entity integrates its own constructive and aesthetic completeness. In our daily practice, we are more interested in the question of assembling elements rather than in architecture in itself. We like when an architectural or an urban erupts while it was not planned, but that imposes itself thanks to its logic. Those facts create a new and more dynamic regulation with their surrounding. So this image alludes to the idea of composite architecture, made from diverse and not much homogeneous elements. Here we find again our favorite subject on the collage. The collage as a combination, montage of separated elements from various natures which make a whole from parts. Assembly's project is made of this cohabitation of differences. Its plan is simple, intelligible. It is a square with slightly curved sides. It contains an optimized and simple device, a beam column structure, a serving core, and large free spaces for the largest inhabitability. For us, it is about finding solutions that will find echoes as much as into the palace of technology as into a kind of inspired makeshift repair. The ground floor becomes a covered square, likely to welcome the neighborhood's life. It gives the project a strong urban character. Always this preoccupation about ambiguity between inside and outside. Here, elements are mostly mechanically assembled together. Each organ takes part in a global composition of the building. The corridors. For us, all the elements are independent just as layers. It is an autonomous partition of singular elements. Superposition of elements, autonomous parts. Each entity has its own constructive and aesthetic integrity. The main space of the project, the Art of Circus Room with its 3 vaults open on the sky, again this composition where each component becomes a singular and expressive element, part of a whole. Then all the details are related to each other. Here we add what is missing, we replaced as bricoleurs do. The weights of the structure, its expressivity is still recognizable, and particularly its capacity to enlarge and to expand the space. Of course, this composition, element by element, also supports an idea of economy. The bricolage is not so far away, aggregating elements without any order or any subordination. As we can see on this image, where the joints between the concrete blocks and the steel pieces are clearly shown without any added articulations. This is a picture of the facade's prototype we did during the construction side. And from a constructive point of view, we are using specific techniques and strategies. The aim is to propose thermal efficient buildings without compromising light and transparency. The Scale 1 model is an essential piece. It steps in at a crucial point during the process development. In fact, this evolution of the project does not stop after the first phases of the studies, but keeps going during the building site phase. It is a kind of control tool as a biological test from a laboratory. So from conception to construction, where the mock-up is not a model at all, but not yet a building. It is very useful to answer first basic technical objectives, to show real materiality, densities, thicknesses, and structural pieces. But it is also stands as an hybrid object, which gives an idea about the building, but still stands in its own autonomy. It could be looked as a work of art, a temporary installation, and an empty building site. So the question of the dissociation between the form and the function is subordinated to the envelope. And in the French culture, architecture and engineering field have had a long complementary relationship that goes from the Industrial Revolution. So time where technology have not been claimed yet as an aesthetic process, but as a tool serving architecture. And this vision is close to our way to consider the capacity of architecture to progress through time. So for us, flexibility is not linked to a simple versatility of uses. It goes beyond programmatic changes or uses at a specific time. In the actual after-crisis context, we are convinced that this neutrality is one of the most relevant opinions to adapt. So this is precisely the approach we had for this project, which is a researcher residence in the Cité Internationale de Paris, so in the south of France, that we will complete this summer, which is composed by 100 housing units. So this site is quite extraordinary, and it has been conceived following Britain's traditional campuses. And the residence is settled in the middle of a series of major buildings, such as the Iran Pavilion by Claude Parent and the Swiss Pavilion by Le Corbusier. And in that case, it is the power of the site that dedicates imperatives to the project. A simple building, recognizable, economic, and which will survive time. So the plot is very close to the surrounding ring road of Paris. The ring road with its imaginary a break. Sorry? No, I think it's okay. Sorry? So what do you do? No, I think it works now. I think it's coming back. What about the beamer? Aha. Yeah, perfect, but this is not the screen. Okay. So now, so don't move, but do you have any... So the main problem, this is, I don't have this image on my screen. So maybe stop it, maybe just to try. Okay. Does it work? And now? So, great. So, as I was explaining, the plot is very close to the ring road of Paris, and that's really important. I mean, not only because of the constraints, but also just because the project is just between two territories, and of course the main park and also this really noisy infrastructure. So this is a photo montage that shows this plot in between those two situations. And so beside the prestigious side, we had to deal with these specific volumetric constraints. So the context in the Cité Internationale at the end of the park is a very small plot, required compactness. And then the protection from the close presence of the ring road with its noise and environmental issues is not a simple constraint either. So, and the final volume is simply the result of those reflections on the context and its constraints. The very regular structure can be explained by the repetitiveness of the program itself. Small rooms with a very few typological variation. As the other buildings in the park, it has a compact shape. If you look at the plan, it is a splitted square, 3 parallel spaces, housing on the sides and an empty space in the middle with circulations and common spaces. So the housing volumes are splendor and their proportions look like the thinner pavilions of the Cité Internationale. So the residence is then made of 3 parallel strips. These partitions allows a game of transparencies and visual deepnesses, breaking with the monolithic aspect of the main volume. So the current plan, here the same devices are set up as on the other structural capacity project, economy of the material, performance of the envelope, optimized and rational plan. The dilated traffic spaces open on the landscape of the city, which are real meeting places. The east and the west facades are entirely glassed to enjoy the view on the park side and take advantage of the absence of vis-a-vis. However, those glassed facades have nothing of anonymous curtain walls. Here we claim that the window makes wall. In the ground floor, an autonomous and off-centered volume splits under the pilotis, welcoming an outdoor space dedicated to the public and under the lounges and the library. To protect ourselves from the nuisance of the ring road, we have put in place an effective cutting strategy, first to dig the ground and then lift the building. Situated below the natural ground and accessible by a set of ramps, this protective device allows the facade of the ground floor to be glassed and to offer views on the garden level. A real permeability takes place between the park and the building. The first level of the block of housing only starts at an altimetry higher than the ring road, producing a separation effect and providing a level of vacuum air. Finally, what interests us is to produce buildings like skeletons, buildings that could even do without skin. It is the play with the current techniques that allow to offer generosity of face and use. But this glass screen that concentrates uses values, acoustic, fire, thermal constraints in the culmination of a hard work to preserve the simplicity, reconciling the technological palette and the inspired rafistolage or bricolage. Without going in the technical resolution, it is for us to push the limits by putting back technical and other prerequisites. So here is another mock-up. So inside a very simple structure made of beams and columns, some raw materials, it's window view wide, it's benches. A picture from last month in an apartment with all the curtains and all the different elements, the mirror and all the different elements that compose the apartments. And also just a picture from last winter. I mean, maybe it was the spring. I don't remember exactly when we took this picture. So the third project, which is in Caen, that's the west part of France. So this is La Normandie, quite well known during the Second World War. So programmatically, this project is a new generation science center whose vocation is the dissemination of scientific culture. And it brings together Fab Lab, conference venues, exhibition venues, workshop offices, space events. And in addition to the project as an architectural response, what was particularly interesting was, of course, the context of the project. In particular, the context of the commission for a non-profit organization, very short delays, 9 months to build it, a very little defined program and a very low budget. Probably one of the best contexts that we like a very fragile equation. So the project is set up in a site in mutation, the peninsula of Caen, close to a collection of architecture such as the OMA's library or the Justice Palace of Baumschlager. It is not really a master plan only public equipments disseminated on the peninsula. Given the small size of the plot, we proposed a vertical warehouse. We made this model during the competition, and we thought that we were going to do the building like this model without any more details. This picture shows the constructive modalities of the project, which literally proceed from the assemblage, collage, something intentionally clumsy. The project overlaps a public place, an exhibition space, conference room, bar, manufacturing workshops, digital cuts, and some other incredible machines. And in fact, the goal was, of course, to create a kind of a business incubator. On the top of the building, we proposed that Belvedere terrace, a space even on the roof. So it is therefore a set of trays detached from the ground, trays of 500 square meters without any structural constraints. In this environment made of juxtapositions of architectures, we wanted to capture this energy of the unstable and to do almost anything awkward without aesthetic prerequisites. Of course, in this process, without aesthetic wish, we do not underestimate the formal aspect of the project. The accessibility of the roof transforms it into an active surface and a strategic public spot of the city. The terrace, through point of view, has become a new reference point in the city. So this space is able to host a multitude of events, outdoor exhibition, concert, private, evening, or we hope one day a gourmet bar. So the dome originally was thought as a temporary construction closer to the circus tent than the building, but gradually it settled. The idea for us was to offer maximum livability. We have set ourselves the goal to organizing only two types of space, the free plan and the serving spaces. The floors are carried by 4 serving volumes, staircase, elevator, which are installed on the periphery that completely filling the space. It is therefore an efficient structure because optimized and prefabricated to reduce the execution times and which determines the flexible and evolutionary free trays. Those 3 slabs contained in the same envelope can also operate independently night and day. So this document is really important for us. I mean, all the time, and that was one of the main targets that we have to reach. So the ambitious, or maybe the idea being that each slab can accommodate any kind of manifestation of use. Divisible or openable spaces, archiving, sporting, even living room. It is a sort of scenography in white. We are therefore in a superposition of slabs and atmospheres that is a reminiscence of the project of Saint-Blaise, where architecture then appears as what remains when one has got rid of the superfluous. We are indeed in a form of deprivation, where the buildings we produce are reduced in their strict necessities under their hold of austerity. We want that remains to go beyond a simple form, a simple envelope. Each level has a height of 6 meters and alternates curtain walls and ETFE cushions. It is a thermally efficient building without compromising transparency and light. ETFE has the advantage of being a thermally efficient material, lightweight, even more than glass, and economical. Here again, the window is the wall. So a principal detail section that showed the overlaying of the duplexes and the alternation of curtain wall and ETF parts. So as an inside view showing the domestic envelope and all the windows, and a night view of the building, so remain in this logic of island of and autonomous buildings that nevertheless create a link to their context. It is obviously one of the topics on which the office works. It is probably the search for a continuity based on the confrontation rather than joint ownership, seeking in the plan a common geometry. Here, guarantee of the coherence between the different and singular architectural expressions. Here, some interview views of the trace, with each visit a new organization of the spaces according to the events. Unexpected situations in the appropriation of the space, floors, an optimistic view in the idea of designing and transformation. Here, the workshops. So I try to, every time it's quite difficult to explain the work we do every day. So it's, a lecture is sometimes just to focus on some specific parts. So I guess, not to conclude as a conclusion, maybe just just to start the debates, or maybe it's not a debate, but much more as a discussion, and maybe this reading was not really what you were expecting, but I think probably we try to identify what we look for, because I have the feeling that we don't know so much. We have to do, and then we start to think about what we produced. And probably the common, this common base is probably has to be connected with this desire to exacerbate some contradictions which exist in our daily life, probably some cultural, technological and artistic contradiction, and to make probably something much more productive. So I guess you understood that we are not theoretical or dogmatic architects. In our daily life, this is not the situation. I think we just care fairly little about this question, and this is more about maybe a kind of posture than a statement. So we seek above all to preserve a certain form of freedom in the development of the projects, not to be captive to a prerequisite that does not need to be. So that's really, I talk about honesty at the beginning, in the way to develop the things. Yeah, maybe that's something which is quite important just to express and just to share. Just to share also the doubts that we have, because we have to assume that situation, and this is something quite exciting, not to know what you will do tomorrow. Thank you. Okay. Just, I was supposed to talk with this short video. I like it. I guess you know those people from, I think they come from Chile and on architecture. So they produce some, so many movies about architecture, and I really like the way how they show the things. But we're supposed to get sound. It's not. There's nobody talks. It's only. Yeah, we should. Okay, it's not so important. It's just maybe just to feel also the context is also a question of noise, but sometimes it's quite. Yeah, we get it. Okay, but now we don't have to. Okay, no, but it will work. I have the feeling that it will work. So, of course, we talk often about. Okay, doesn't matter. It's not so important. We have to deal with. Yeah, I mean how to show architecture, and because I think this is, of course, like a mirror or just a way just to. I mean, because most of the time you, with your project, you only see all the things which don't work. So it's quite interesting to get some people from outside, and then they try to catch maybe what is so important. So, and I like that way to build this movie. So it was, I think, 2 years ago, and yeah, nothing to tell, just enjoy.
Ah, ¿las pones tú? Están aquí abajo. Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, for this second part, as you know from previous events, we will move into a series of topics or tags that we have discussed with Alexander before. It's important to mention that instead of, he has chosen 20 images, but instead of choosing several images for each topic, they have chosen a bunch of images that works with many topics at the same time, right? Which is also part of the way they work, as he has mentioned during the presentation. For the first group of ideas, we have chosen the tag of machine buildings, which is a concept that you have defined in your work. And it has to do a lot with something that you have mentioned during the presentation, which is this idea of working with no programming or no function. I think you have used several words that are very precise and very specific with this idea, such as neutrality, duty of adaptability, organization, warehouse. So, like the first question, which is very broad, is how do you define this idea of machine buildings that you have used several times defining your work? And more specifically, two main questions that you might have answered maybe a little bit during the presentation, but if you can go further into them. One is how this idea of flexibility or neutrality works with the program of housing, which is, you already mentioned maybe that flexibility as a repetition of rooms might be one option, but if you can go further into a housing program. And also the second question in relation with machine buildings, which is, you also mentioned the idea of assembling elements. Do the idea of fragmenting the whole help in your process to get to that intention of neutrality? So if you can go further into those ideas.
I really like the idea of atlas. Probably that's one of the starting point, because I think it was more or less 2 years ago we've been invited in Germany to teach for 1 year, and then so it was in Düsseldorf, and then we have a very small experience, academic experience, and that was really we like that kind of challenge, because then suddenly we're not in the right, in the best situation. And then we started to think about how to teach architecture. It's quite difficult all the time. So, and then we started to think about that's the moment that we started to think about bâtiment machine, and also about this topic about atlas. Should we mix this topic and also this methodology, the idea to build a project through this process, just to build an atlas? By starting with the image, try to understand with the students what's going on this picture, and then start to build the story. And that was we did this for 1 year, for 2 semesters. And the experience, I guess, for the students, but also for us, was really important. Then, because suddenly it was another way to develop the projects, just by using images, and not, you don't have to produce anything, you just have to think about the images and what's going on in the images. And that's what I like so much with that way to build stories. Because suddenly you have to focus so much about an image. So in this situation, most of them are in black and white, but this is just by chance. There's no any idea on the backside. And then we push them not to show us so many architectural references, just to think about the daily life. I think this is also something which is quite important, because we feel that okay, architecture is sometimes like a meta langage, so it's sometimes it's a kind of field which is just seeing, probably it has to open a little bit more the doors and just to integrate more and more things. I mean, really, I think this is also in relation with our own practice. I think we work a lot with very trivial things. Trivial, of course you have, I mean, your goal is to create some environment, I mean, buildings where the life is better, I mean, for the people, but at the same time, I mean, to get it better, I mean, probably you have to work with these very basic problems, how to screw this piece and how to put it on the table. So this is the way that we work. And then, so the idea of the atlas was really important, just to mix, and of course there are many relationships with the book that we published 4 years ago, which was at the starting point just a book for ourselves, just to know what we produce for 7 years. So we believe in the capacity of the images and just to build a story, and that's and then mixing with this topic of bâtiment machine, it was really nice experience, and the results were really, I mean, for us, really exciting and really, we were really happy with this. So bâtiment machine is, we try all the time for each project to define the limits, maybe, where we start, and when we have to stop to draw. I mean, sometimes we draw too much. We try to define the things, but sometimes it's much better just to stop, because, and that was a really good experience with Caen, because for during the construction side, we didn't have time, we didn't have money, and then that was a really great context, because suddenly you have to take some decisions, and probably the solutions are not in relationship with the drawing. I mean, so maybe just to follow the constructors, and then sometimes they are sometimes they focus on the cheapest solution, but maybe it's not so bad. So of course you have to deal, you have to say maybe you should adapt some parts. And I think this experience in Caen is very strong, because suddenly we felt maybe a little bit more about what is our work, what do we want to reach. And I think more and more we don't care so much about the drawing, or to draw nice elements. I think the goal is how to create the conditions to where the people will be could decide about their way to use a space. So that's probably the reason for why we made this connection with this idea of machine. I mean, the goal is not to reach something, I mean, the building is at first a kind of machine where it's possible to do what you want. I mean, of course it depends on the program, but this is something which is really, really important, and that's the reason for why step by step and project after project we try to take a distance with this, with our own point of view, and just try to take some decisions where the target is not to draw a nice or an aesthetic topic, where maybe the aesthetic approach is much more as a result. So yeah, I don't know if I really give you the answer that you were expecting, but it's sometimes that's the problem with the atlas, because you have so many lines between all of them.
But I was gonna say that we can accept your answer if you choose some images to support the topic.
Yeah, I mean,
which one do you want to choose?
We should say, no, I mean, there are some, I mean, this topic is, of course, ask the question, or maybe this is the question of the links between architecture and techniques. And that's something which is really important for us. I mean, I try to define through the relationship in France, I mean, in the French culture, about the relationship between the engineer field and architecture. And I think, of course, one of the, maybe the glass house by Charo explained this equation. I mean, okay, so this is the, so yeah, this one is, of course, I mean, the way to open the windows. I mean, suddenly the scale of the elements, it's a house, but at the same time, the scale is not a domestic scale. So that's something which is quite, so how to go back, in that way. So, but I should take also this project by Luis Kahn, then suddenly, I mean, you have all the pipelines, and then the function is just to satisfy a use, but at the same time, the expression of those elements. So, yeah, I mean, that's, so we try to develop, I mean, in a very simple way, I mean, just to think all the time about this relationship between techniques and architecture. If we have to chair, I mean, I'm not sure it's really the topic, but.
I don't know which tag should I go again now, because we have two that are related with the things you have already said. Like, for example, we had this other tag that it was Atlas and collections, also catalogs and imaginary. And you in your text, like 99 notes that we can find in the 2G publication, you have compiled questions and themes, like without any particular link between them. Like you write them that it could be 99 sentences, definitions, drawings, poems, cliches, as an atlas, as a pocket-sized museum. And but we really want to. Well, you have already more or less answered to that question. But we really want to work to know if does your work come out as a result of a sampling of and mixing some of these notes, like if it was a panel of Avi Warburg Nemosi atlas, or I mean, when you are beginning a project, you just pick up some of these references and want it to work all together, like, or how is it working? I mean how do you work with this atlas in your daily life?
I mean, maybe we don't need any wall to pick up the images, but I think the story. I mean, when you start a competition, because I mean, all the projects we develop, we did a competition. I mean, that's not a target, or but that's probably the best way to work with the client is quite difficult for us. I mean, just to listen his desires and wishes, and it's quite maybe, I don't know if it's boring, but it's just doesn't work in our we have Stephanie and I, and with our team, just to work alone. I mean, in a certain way, and then just to build the story step by step. So I don't know. I mean, now we don't put some images like this on the wall, but we build the stories through references, and that's of course. But they are less in an architectural way. So, but of course. But I think all of us work in that way. So, what is different is maybe what kind of what kind of images or what kind of references. And also the links, because what I like in that kind of image, this is all the links. I mean, all of us who have a different story to tell from this selection of images, so you can connect them just because of the color, but just because sometimes this is just a graphic connection between two images, or just sometimes this is just a feeling. So we like, I mean, that's our story, and probably this is the feel of architecture. I mean, you have some rational decisions, and you have some other, they are not. I mean, this is absolutely subjective, and that's what we like so much, because this is really, as this material, you can change what you want. I mean, you have the same program, and then suddenly you build a story. So all the time the question is about how to build a story that you are able to follow. I mean, and if you win the competition, you have to follow this story for several years. Okay. So it's quite important. So this is a way. I mean, and this is probably much more some like all those images we just some of them we have them before, but we did this selection just because you asked us. I mean, you gave us some topics, and we said, yeah, okay. So this is all the time. We talk this afternoon about research and iconographic research, and that's we believe that it's super important. Not to, of course, it's not only architectural references, but just to catch in some images, some like I also like this one, just because then suddenly this is this idea of making. I mean, just to manipulate the things, just to do a model, just to build, and how to build some ideas. That's something which is so exciting in this job.
Well, I think this moves to the next step.
Yeah.
Well, I like a lot the idea that you mentioned about the links between the references and the story that you build behind them, and how some of those links have some reason behind, and some they are just taken as your feeling goes, right? So the third tag that we have was reason versus feeling, which is also something very present in your work. Even though your office started right at the beginning of the crisis, and maybe that's why your work usually seems to be especially concerned with functional and economical issues, but there is always some kind of license where you take certain formal or stylistic decisions that may not be objectively explained, or in other words, while your work is very rational, one can see how the feeling comes into your designs without the need of justification, right? So the question is, at what moment of the design process are those formal or aesthetical decisions taken? Why are you interested on them and on make them obvious in your work?
But this is all the time, no? No, I mean, what we try to, I mean, for me, I mean, with Stephanie, I mean, this is a set of decisions, and then from the starting point, I mean, from the competition until the completion of a project, then and all the time you have to take decisions, all the time. Then the color for the color is a great topic, I mean, because there's no reason to decide it's gray or it's pink, or so we just have to assume, and that's just really frivole. I don't know how to say frivole, but something which is just because you saw, maybe because the weather is nice these days. So that's, we just have to, sometimes the decisions are really light. Yeah. So, but there's, I mean, that's, I tried to explain this during the lecture, just about subordination. I think that's, I mean, a small thing can be more important than the biggest one. I mean, it's not. There's no relationship with the dimension. I mean, functional reasons and aesthetic reasons. I mean, there's no reason that one is stronger than the other one. It's just a question of decision, and this is your decision. So you fix the level of importance between the different parameters that you have to manage every day.
Would you say that both of decisions come from references? Like you mentioned before that you like to find equilibrium between engineering and architecture, right? And maybe the references that you use have part of both sides also?
Yeah, but okay. References are really important. I mean, just you need to get some things in your mind, but at the same time, okay, references is just an input. I mean, just to switch on the engine. So that's all, and then you start to build your own story all the time. So, but of course, it's quite difficult now. I mean, for all of us, just to live or just to do the project without thinking about what's going on, what happened before. I mean, so we don't invent anything. We just combine things and we put them together, and that's probably our work. I mean, we are not in the invention, I'm sure. We just reinterpret, we put things together, and this is not only one system, but it is probably several systems that we combine. And and this idea of alteration is quite important. I mean, to do something like a system is not so, for us is not really exciting. Really, and not really contemporary at the same time. That's, we just have to integrate in a project so many different things, and that's what is so nice. That's what I like.
Also, well, talking about the things you were talking before, like another tag that for us it was pretty obvious in your work, that it was this daily life architecture, or this triviality, or this ordinary tag. And we studied your work, and we noticed that you use this topic in different ways. Like, for example, your office works with the concept of everydayness, like this daily life or triviality or ordinary, in different ways. We have noticed that you have to want to bring architectural value to our daily life architecture, like, for example, a sports center that is designed with the presence of an state institution, for example. Or other way of working with this topic, with this triviality thing, is that as you explain in one of the texts you write, in your background of architectural references are coming more for a real urban jumble than from a well-planned city. You said, we understand that, in other words, you work indistinctly with prosaic and banal references. We can call them ordinary with value references, and also with academic references. And also we understand that this triviality or ordinary topic also could be related with the fact that you are aware of the affection of your work in the daily life of the numerous city dwellers. As it is reflected in the letter that you received on the 5th of May of 2016 of one of the persons who live nearby the sports centers, that it was explaining how the building affects to his daily life. Could you explain us a little bit how important is this triviality topic? Also, when you were talking about the mock-ups that are pretty important for you also, you were always explaining that with this binomial thing, that it was, you were working like it was familiar and unfamiliar, the known versus the unknown. Is this something that it's working with the ordinary as if it was extraordinary or something like this? I don't know if it's...
Yeah, you are a lot of people that who believe in the daily life. Daily life, of course, sometimes it's really incredible, and sometimes it's not. But at the same time, people will live in our buildings, so that's probably one of the most important thing. That's really trivial. A really simple approach, not really sophisticated. So maybe I'm not the best to talk about that kind of. Your explanations were quite interesting. So that's the reason for why sometimes the mirror is not the best way to watch something. But yeah, that's what is so important. The small thing, not the detail. Not the architectural details. Of course, we have to solve that kind of questions because we have to think about how a building will be able to resist in the time, and it's not so obvious in the French process, because you control only a very small part in this process. But yeah, the daily life is okay. That's the target. I tried to explain this just before, but I think we just have to define a kind of tool. A building which is able to absorb what the people would like to do in a building. That's probably what we focus so much about this. So sometimes it's like a phantasm, maybe, because of course you cannot do what you want in a building, and you cannot change all the time the functions, but if you think through time, I mean, probably you find some ways just to solve this question. And about triviality, it's, yeah, that's something which is really important. I mean, because life is made of a lot of trivialities, so sometimes you have to solve them, sometimes you just have to show it, and sometimes, so it's really, I think now with Stephanie, I mean, it's really like a game. I mean, in the way to manage all the problems in the project, and because I have the feeling that it's as it is a set of decisions, it is also a set of problems. I mean, you have so many walls, or not walls, but some you have to fight, not to fight, because everybody is an enemy. It's just because you have to defend your ideas, and you don't need so many ideas. I mean, we don't have so many ideas on the backside. I mean, some convictions or some obsessions, but just to reach them, it's really hard. I mean, you have to fight. I mean, you have to convince your client, and if you don't succeed, you have to fight with your client. And this is also, I mean, this is the same discussion with the engineers and with so many different people. So this triviality is really I mean, I have the feeling more and more that the project is in that question of triviality. I mean, because then suddenly you have to solve an equation, which is something which is quite exciting. So maybe you will focus too much about this question, and all the projects are made of small stories. So the question of composition is something like this. I mean, so we put things together and then we solve in that way one part, but we don't try to connect them with the other questions. I mean, suddenly the structural questions are. So I don't know if it's one more time. Maybe I changed the way. But,
when you sent us the 20 images, I was pretty curious with the cat one, because I'm a cat lover, you know.
Which one?
And every time I saw a cat, I always look for it. The cat one.
Yeah, if you have if you have to choose one of the
I'm
images.
sorry, which one?
It's this one.
Ah, okay. So this is a movie by Truffaut. So from, I don't remember exactly, maybe it was 55 or 56. So it wasn't, I mean, the goal was not to talk about Truffaut. It was just about that kind of moments. So then suddenly from this image with this cat, with these different pieces on the plate, I mean on the board, then suddenly you could imagine so many stories. So that's really, you don't know what is the situation. You just feel that someone brings something just in front of a door, and then suddenly you have this cat. So that's one more time just how you could imagine the next step of this image. So this is a very fragile moment, or something which is not so important, but at the same time this is so. You can feel so many, you can get some remembers, you can imagine another story, whatever is the story of the movie. So one more time, really subjective image.
Okay. Well, just before the image, you were talking about the idea of, well, you didn't use this word, but I think it has to do with the concept of juxtaposition, right? Because you use the idea of juxtaposition in many different ways. Again, you use it from a material point of view, like you use juxtaposition of textures, of architectural elements, of points of views, but you also use juxtaposition from the more the imaginary world, right? Like you, as you have been saying, you use different references and you put them together and you make the story after that. So would you say that your work finds equilibrium between the abstraction of the imaginary and the materiality of the construction and the real physicality of architecture?
I think this is also a link with the way that we develop the projects. So we solve one problem, or we decide for something, and then we have to solve another question. So that's probably the way, I mean, how we work. So of course the question of the structure, and then also about the skin, and also about, so it's all the time really independent decisions. So this idea of superposition is just a result, much more a target for us. And I think it's, and this is also the way that we manage the competitions. We don't talk so much about facade, we talk much more about envelope. I mean, the facade is not, we don't draw the facades, or we draw them at the end just because, so you need a window, so you need an opening for the fire regulations, and then we put the things together, and then so it's really like an ecosystem maybe, but and then we produce all the images. So this is someone from who doesn't work in the office, and they produce the images, and that's the result, more or less. No, it's not. It's really. I mean, we try to respect this rule, because okay, we could say, yeah, this window should be much more on the left, or maybe this door should be higher. But at this, I mean, this is really terrible discussion for us, because of course with Stephanie we won't get probably the same point of view. I mean, probably she will say it's blue and I will say it's red, and then which color is it, the mix between them? So we just have to respect some really basic rules, just to say, okay, so this is a rational attitude, but at the same time, when someone, I mean, one of us or someone from our team say, okay, we could do this in another way, even if it's absolutely not rational, and if it works, and if we are convinced, let's do it.
Okay. I don't know, maybe we can open because we have some much more questions, but we can ask you later on, but maybe we can open the debate to the other people if there is someone who wants to ask something to Alexandra. I don't know who is the one
you have
who...
the microphone.
Is there anyone who wants to ask anything? Because I can ask him a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's
A
impossible
lot of
to
people.
see anything.
Yeah.
Even if the light is quite...
Well, I thought they were going to ask you about it, but as I see, maybe it's one you have written down there. But I'm very interested in the mock-up moment of the project. At what time do you convince the client that you need that?
This is one.
At what time do you convince your clients that you need to do that? Prior to signing your contract, even, or maybe when the chantier is working, because we are all involved in processes, in construction processes that are more and more closed each time. I mean, you need to define everything before anything starts. And once it's defined, it's very difficult to change anything because of the budget, because of the license that you have been given. Many other agents are involved, and nobody wants to move a thing. So if the mock-up moment is not in an early stage of the development of the project, I cannot see how it can be useful for the process. But on the other hand, it's not able to have a mock-up until you have a contractor and you have some decisions made. So if you could just explain us, because it's a very important moment for the...
I mean, just also because I think it's quite important. I mean, we don't work so much with the 3D software. I mean, all we do is, I mean, we produce. I mean, we work with models, and small, big, large, and so that's probably just our relationship with the fact of making. I mean, that's quite important. I mean, also in the process, and then the mock-up is just the next step. I mean, it's just the scale one. So about just to give you, I mean, I probably have several answers. I mean, because it depends of your client. Sometimes we don't have to say anything. We just define in the, how do you say it? I mean, just before to select the constructors. I mean, you write so many documents that you have to respect, blah, blah, blah. And then, so, for example, in Assemblées, there were no discussion with the client. We just wrote the things, yeah, we have at this moment enough money to build it, so we didn't have to deal with the constructors during the negotiations, just to say, okay, probably we could win 50,000 euro. So I don't remember exactly the price for the prototype, but it was probably something like 30,000 euros. But at this moment, we won the competition, so it was 8 years ago. I mean, there were financial crisis, but at the same time, it was a budget from before the crisis. So there was no discussion about the prototype, and then the client, I mean, the relationship with the client was quite good, and I think it was, everything was quite easy, and there were. So now the situation is a little bit different. I mean, the mock-up becomes smaller and smaller, and sometimes they disappear. So that this is the situation. So all the time we try to build them and just to get the money to build them. But now the situation in France is quite difficult. I mean, but I think everywhere it's quite difficult. So to get the budget, I mean, to respect the budget is quite difficult. So we had very long negotiations, and then most of the time the prototype is not the main preoccupation of the client. So we have to deal in another way. But anyway, we find some small ways just to build one part of it. So but that's really, I mean, for Assemblées it was absolutely innocent. I think we didn't realize what we asked, but I think that's what we need. I mean, just a kind of innocence in our practice, and just to try anyway. We don't have to get so much to lose. But that was a really good experience. When Caen, there were no prototype, for example. I mean, there were no money. I mean, the building was so cheap, and moreover, we had only 9 months to build it, so it was concretely not possible. I mean, not concretely, but in the practice, it was not possible to spend time to build something outside of the building and just to check if it was the right dimensions. But at the same time, it works without prototype sometimes.
I would like to ask a question. In this series, we've been always very interested on also asking questions about the management of the practice itself. The buildings you show us, the scale was something that we can understand that it's accomplished for an office which is not really big in terms of human power. But since you are getting bigger and bigger projects, foreign competitions, and even not just in the area of Paris, but abroad in Belgium, Switzerland, how this inevitably makes changes in the practice itself? Do you still work as a main core, like Stephanie and yourself, with the collaborations, or you are exploring new ways of collaborating with people and creating bigger teams? How this makes the practice changes from small projects to bigger ones?
It's our question now. It's a really good question. I think it's how to continue. I mean, to continue or to change. But I have the feeling that for this moment, what is quite exciting and quite difficult, it's, I mean, when you work outside of your country, so abroad, so you just have to understand the rules and how does it work and what kind of relationship you have to create with your client, also with the engineers, because the culture is really different if you compare Switzerland and France, and also in Belgium. So it's really, I mean, you just have to, what is so important for us is just to understand the rules and the context. And that's now, we started to work with the project in Lausanne for 1 year. So now we know a little bit more about how to be, how to get a meeting with the client, because this is absolutely different. I mean, it's really nice to, in Switzerland there's no conflict. No, it's really nice. I mean, but I mean, in France, I mean, most of the time, if you come in a meeting,
You're fighting.
I mean, there are some fights. So this is our daily life. So and it works like this, and it's not a problem. It's just an habit. But in Switzerland, then suddenly the relationships are really different. So you just have to be quiet. You have to explain everything. You can. It's not necessary to hide anything. You just have to put everything on the table. So that's the main question now is just how to reach your targets. I mean, your preoccupations. I mean, it's not because you change the country that you will change your way of thinking, or it's just to control more or less the situation, and also and I think there's a lot of answers in the way to be, and to understand how the engineers in Sweden, they are good, but at the same time they all the time they want to focus on the very small part of the project, and this is not really strategic. I mean, so that means you probably have to work in another way with the engineers, just to ask. You have to ask them to, so go back, because the solution of the project is not in this detail, but in a larger strategy. So now it's quite, it's too early to tell you how we will manage this situation. But at the same time, the project we want in Brussels and in Lausanne with Baukunst, I mean, the ideas on the backside about this question of malleability, about the statue of the structure, and how to create some spaces, whatever it's going on inside, laboratories or offices or TV channel. At the same time, we just try to control the program, just to neutralize, does it work? Just to neutralize the program. I mean, to say, okay, so now we solved all the technical questions, because this is this triviality. I mean, how to solve, you have so many different levels, but each department wants a specific one, a specific organization, because they work in that way. So, but you have to find the matrix are the things that they are in common between all of them. And then, so that's the most exciting. I mean, this is a very interesting moment. I mean, just to understand. I mean, about the context, about their preoccupation, and so. But I mean, to be honest, one more time. I mean, it's quite now. It's. I mean, it's new for us. I mean, so we are just super happy to spend time in Brussels or in Lausanne, just because it's nice to be somewhere else. I mean, your point of view is suddenly. I mean, it's quite exciting to be in a place that you don't know.
Well, this is, I don't know how to explain this. I think the energy is quite a task for architects in the future. I see that the transparency and the cleanness of your building, I don't know if it's really an industrial position or it is an aesthetic position. And maybe the energy problem will be the thing that will tell us what is the truth, the honest part of the thing.
I don't know how to make the question. The question would be, these are zero energy consumption buildings. They are prepared for the future of Europe. You're working in Europe. In Europe, in 2 years, in 5 years, all our buildings must be zero energy consumption. Do you really think that this transparency, very cheap made, you said that the buildings are low cost, is feasible, or we architects should look in other directions?
I'm sorry, I lost the end of your sentence or question.
Do you think that the future of architecture is in this lightness?
Yes.
In zero energy?
Thank you. No, it's, I mean, I'm not, I just defend, I mean, for example, you just have to, okay, we have the office for 10 years, and that's the story we built. Nothing else. I mean, there's no, this is our point of view. I mean, this is the answers that we gave through competitions. And they are super performant. I mean, we work a lot about this question, how to solve this, the energy questions, and also what kind of solutions to solve them. So there's probably we like glass because this is not. This is nothing. I mean, if you check, there's no. This is just something in between inside and outside, and then. I have this phantasm to live outside, but at the same time to be inside. So this is some preoccupations. Maybe we are wrong, and maybe we are not. We don't care so much about where is the truth. This is not a preoccupation. And I think it's not a topic. But the true topic in your question is, of course, about the energy. So we work with a lot of engineers just to solve, because we have to respect some rules. And I think the rules in Spain, in France, in Switzerland, in Belgium, and are more or less the same. Of course, the climatic conditions are not the same. The sun is not the same. You have to protect. In Brussels, you probably don't have to protect in the same way than in Marseille or in Madrid. So, of course, there are some conditions which are not the same. But I'm pretty proud of the performances that we reached, because they are transparent, but at the same time, all the people who use those buildings are super happy. Not for everything. I mean, if you come, and probably they won't be so clean, because, okay, they live. I mean, people use them, and people break the doors, and people break the windows, and people break the walls. So we have the same problems. So, of course, this is pictures just after the completion of the building, so it's not really the truth. But that's... and that's the reason for why we come back in the buildings, just to get some other pictures. But we work a lot with that kind of questions. So about the future, I don't have any idea about what is the future and what kind of preoccupations all the young students who are in this lecture room will have. And I'm not sure. I have the feeling that nobody knows about what will be the main preoccupation. Probably this one is an important one. But maybe, we don't know. Maybe the next crisis will change our preoccupation, or maybe because they will be, I don't know what. But so I don't have this pretentious to say this is the future. I just show what we do. That's all.
Well, do we have any other question? No? No. Well, I think we are running out of time. So thank you very much, Alexandre, for your presentation. And thank you, everyone, for coming. And we hope you have learned a lot and you have enjoyed all the guests that we have had. This is our last event, so we hope to see you in September with the presentation of the publication and with the beginning of the next cycle. Thank you very much.